programs, and welcome to the latest edition of the Awesome Friday podcast. My name is Matthew, and with me, as always, is Simon. Say hello, Simon.
Hola, amigos, ¿qué pasa? Not to confuse you, viewers, but that was actually me speaking Spanish, and I know if that confused you. We don't have a Spanish guest with us today. It was actually me. And we're using that language today to tie in our discussion of a modern feature film.
Yes, we are once again speaking about the story of the West Side.
Yes,
Romeo
I love
and Juliet of New York.
I really wanted this movie to end with, and that was us. Who'd have known we'd find heartbreak in our West Side Story credits.
That would have been terrible.
Brilliant. Just brilliant.
Well, the West Side Story, the new version, Best Picture nominated, Steven Spielberg directed, has been added to Disney Plus. So Simon finally got a chance to see it. So we'll be talking about that a little bit, and then we're going to move on to the new Netflix blockbuster science fiction action thing, The Adam Project.
Yes, but to answer your question, I'm fine, thank you.
Oh, I mean, yeah,
just
assumed.
Let's not get straight into it. We have a few minutes of banter, surely.
Oh, we do. I just assumed you were fine, and sometimes I forget that we're not recording when we speak for 20 minutes before we hit record. So.
Well, it's nice because it's been another Sunday morning of trying to sort out two children doing two different things at the same time, and now they've all just gone somewhere, and so this is a nice spot of calm. So I had one of these weekends. I had a very frustrating week, and when I get frustrated, I either just surf the internet mindlessly. So I installed and deleted TikTok again within a day, because it is the worst time sink I've ever experienced. It's worse than anything else. And so I delete that for my own mental health because it's terrible. And my second state is bake. And as you know, this week I baked a vanilla sponge with cherry buttercream and mango icing. So
yes, I was actually pretty upset we didn't get a chance to come over and sample that.
Oh, yeah, you got to be quick in these parts to eat cake. And my third state is clean, capital K, block capitals. And we have a 3-story house now, and there's a lot of just housework all the time, and it can pile up. So I was like, fuck this, I'm gonna clean. So I did. I cleaned so much like an old man. I hurt my back, and I basically had to lie flat and watch the Adam Project last night, but it worked out. We've now got a clean house.
Well, good.
So how about you? How's your week been?
Oh, it's just been another week, and it's it says March 760 something of the year 2020. So,
but good news for you. Good news for you. Working in retail, no more mask mandate. As someone in Save On Foods announced to me, the cashier in Save On Foods said, "Welcome to TF5 Friday," and as I like to call it, Freedom Friday. And I'm like, first of all, please, can I just buy these 3 things without a conversation? This is a very Canadian thing to engage in conversation when I'm just trying to buy things. Second of all, what are you talking about? I had a bad day Friday, and I wasn't in the best headspace. And so this poor guy who was clearly, I think he just started. And when, I don't know if you find this, Matt, but when retail workers just start, they really want to be friends with everyone, and they talk too much. And he was like, well, I got to get Freedom Friday because no more masks. And I'm like, freedom from what? Like I went Batman. freedom from what? Tell me. And he's like, because I don't like wearing the mask. I'm like, and then he got really uncomfortable, and I just bought my stuff. Thank you. And he actually said, thanks. I really like helping people. And I said, and just left.
I don't know. I work in a place that's obviously customer facing, but we're actually, the mask mandate in British Columbia is now ended, and that's a whole other discussion. But where I work, we're still required to wear them for at least a month. So
good. I never take mine off.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, our customers are not, but I doubt anyone will see my face at work for some time to come.
Wait, so. Are you keeping it on for a month? Is that just for staff, or is that a store policy for customers too, or is that just for you?
So company-wide for employees. We're not allowed to enforce. We're not allowed to enforce it for customers anymore.
I mean, you could enforce it because you're a private. It's private property in theory, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could, but we're not doing that.
Okay.
So,
Right. Heaven forbid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, it's fine. It's fine. I didn't have a particularly good or bad week. I just had a long one where I existed and was exhausted. So, in my continuing existential crisis,
Existence is exhausting by Matt
yeah,
Simpson,
yeah,
Volume 1.
yeah. It's well, I mean, to be fair, I think this first came out of the podcast last week, so this is Volume 2. If we're going to be fair about it,
It's true.
but yes, my soul is drenched in ennui. That's where I'm at in life. But at least I got to watch some good movies, so there's that.
Yes, and we're going to
Yeah,
talk about 2 of them today. How's that for a
we
segue?
are. It is. It is. Shall we dive right into the story of the West Side?
Yes, the West Side
So we
Story.
spoke about this back when it was new, and I got to see it in a theater, and you've now seen it on Disney Plus. I had planned to rewatch, but did not. But at the time, I rewatched the original and then went straight to the new one, and I thought that was a good choice. Did you do the same?
I coincidentally we watched the original about 6 months ago with my family, and so it was still pretty fresh. Um, like I'm a theatre kid, as I'm sure many of you know. West Side Story is one of my absolute favorite musicals. So I think Spielberg's the greatest living film director. So this was the film that almost got me back in cinemas. I didn't go and see it in the cinema. Um, Actually, the film I did go and see instead of this in the cinema was Sing 2 with my daughter, who guilt tripped me into going to see Sing 2 in the cinema. Luckily, there was no one else in it. But I missed out on seeing this in the cinema so I could see Sing 2. Quick review of Sing 2. It's terrible, and the world is saved by a U2 song, just to rub it in how bad that movie is. But anyway, so I was really, really happy for it to pop up on Disney Plus. And I mean, it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. And very different from the original. And how you like your musicals is going to dictate how you like this movie, because they're both masterpieces and they have 2 different approaches to the material. And some people are going to like that, and some people just are not. And I think they can both coexist, but they're very different approaches.
I'm not sure if you're speaking about just the filmmaking approach or just the more social approaches to the fact of
No.
the new one.
Oh no, no, I'm not. Like the social auditions. I mean, that you look at the people involved in this. You've got Spielberg, obviously, and you've got um, oh God, I've forgotten his name. He just died recently. The composer, the lyricist. Oh my God,
Oh,
Sondheim. Jesus
Stephen
Christ,
Sondheim. Yep.
my brain went. So you got Sondheim, who before he sadly died was working with Spielberg with this. You've got Tony Kushner, Angels in America, doing the script. Like, um, this is like high level, and so of course we're going to see some more social issues, and it's a lot harder. Not like harder to watch, but hard hitting. Like there's certain aspects in New West Side Story that are alluded to in the original, and they are very much challenged in this in a very, very good way. Like Tony Kushner's a brilliant scriptwriter,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm actually talking about the approach to filming a musical. So the original West Side Story, as many films and definitely musicals of that time, were stage plays that were filmed, and the dialogue is performed as theatrical dialogue. The difference between theatrical dialogue and filmic dialogue is theatrical dialogue is bigger. It has more projection, and because it needs to be. And what I found really, really interesting is that Spielberg's West Side Story is a filmmaker making a film of a musical.
Yeah,
Does that
that's a
make
good way to put
sense?
it.
Do you know what I
I
mean?
mean, my impression at the time that I saw it, and I think I said this, I didn't listen to our old episode about it, but my impression is that it's a much more cinematic version of the material. It's
Mm-hmm.
clearly made by, not to say that the people who made the 1961 version weren't great filmmakers. Robert Wise had a bunch of Best Picture Academy Award statues, and Ernest Lehman also, like he had like 6 nominations for Best Screenplay. Like there was some pedigree there too, but this was very much. I think the styles of acting have changed a lot, and the styles of filmmaking have changed a lot,
Mm-hmm.
just from being more stagey to more what we now call cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is much more a film first than it was then. Even though I think that there's definitely more than just pointing a camera at the stage play in the
Mm-hmm.
1961 one, but this is
Mm-hmm.
definitely more you know blocking and camera movements considered
Yeah.
earlier and more thoughtfully in this one for
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely. And you can see it. The biggest difference is in the dialogue scenes, and the dialogue scenes are much quieter. They have much slower pace. The whole thing is kind of less goofy. Like the original West Side Story, the gangs are kind of goofy, right? Especially the Jets. They're these like redheaded boys who are kind of adolescent idiots, and that suits the story really, really well because the whole thing is that classic tragedy, Romeo and Juliet style tragedy of what do we die for? Like, why are we killing each other for this? It's not worth it. And that the Spielberg version is, by its nature, is a lot harder in the way it treats the members of the Jets and the Sharks. That they are a lot more dangerous. They're a lot less kind of goofbally, and that style, it is slightly darker. I don't mean in tone. I mean in like subject matter and how it deals with the stories, because it is more filmic. And when it comes to filming a film, like there's no one who can do it like Spielberg. There's some of the shots. I mean, outside of the dialogue is one thing. When it comes to the choreography and the filming of the dances, there's like open mouth gasping at much of this movie. It's
Hmm.
not just the way he moves the camera. Like if you've seen the clip online, I'm sure, of how that long take of it sweeping through the dance when they first go to the dance, and they go through the corridor, and then the doors open, and it just sweeps through and then turns around and comes back. Like, it just incredible cinematography, incredible direction. But the framing of things popping into frame, like Spielberg has got a very specific way of framing stuff. Like if you
Hmm.
think of Indiana Jones, you think of Jurassic Park, Tintin as well. I think Tintin is one of his best movies because the way he frames things moving into frame is second to none. And if you watch, we talked about this, I think yesterday, the song "Cool" when Tony's trying to convince Riff not to go to the fight, and there's a couple of times where the gun and the heads sort of frame things behind them and they pop into frame. Just amazing, amazing filmmaking. And Spielberg absolutely at his best, and you can tell that this is his passion project since he was a kid. I mean, he dedicated the whole movie to his dad. Like, he's been very open that this is the movie he's been wanting to make his whole life, and you can
Hmm.
kind of see it. Like it's right there on the screen, and it's stellar. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure about the lower key dialogue scenes, the more cinematic dialogue scenes. If I prefer the more the slightly larger theatrical style acting in the original or the filmic acting, but I actually don't think one is better than the other. I think they're just two very different styles, and they both work brilliantly in two different ways. Do you see
Hmm.
what I mean?
No, I do. I think they're both. I think a more specific way that I might frame it is that they're both very much of their time, both in terms of the filmmaking and in terms of the sort of more socially oriented changes. Um, whereas if you look at the filmmaking in the 1961 one, it's not, again, it's not really just pointing a camera at a musical. There's definitely some very deliberate camera motions. Like Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins are very good at moving a camera in and amongst dancers, especially. I
Mm-hmm.
still think that um, the the opening to the 1961 one, the 1961 version is just by itself is a would be a brilliant short film of just these two gangs sort of like
Yeah.
wordlessly hustling for territory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, like in 1961, we just weren't. We were just more racist. Basically, is the way to say it, right? Like I was about to say, we weren't socially conscious, but no, we were just more racist. And the new version makes some of the differences between the Sharks and the Jets more clear and more reasonable. And um, I think that that's very much a product of being in 1961 versus 2021.
Yeah.
I think it's all. I think they both exist as sort of. I think they're probably both masterpieces, and then one is a masterpiece from 1961, and one is a masterpiece from
Yeah.
2021. You know.
You're totally right in terms of the show, the social commentary. Like we just have a very different focus. I think we're more like generally more eager to confront these things head on rather than it just being a story point in the original. Um, and it's uh, what I find interesting in terms of the acting style, though, is that if you compare this to, say, Tick Tick Boom, which is a brilliant musical by Lin-Manuel Miranda, so some, who also knows his theatre very, very well. I'd say Tick Tick Boom is more of the whole thing is more of a theatrical performance. Like the dialogue scenes are more theatrical as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you compare those two, you can see the bigger difference with Spielberg's West Side Story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the you're totally right in terms of the the consciousness of its social issues, but also the danger inherent in the racism is not just about stabbing. Like the scene where Anita comes to Doc's to try and find Tony, or in this version Valentina, um, to tell Tony the message, and she gets locked in, and there's it goes from just being jostling to what is heavily inferred to be the beginning of a gang rape. Like
Mm-hmm.
with the girls pounding on the outside trying to get in, like that is gut wrenching,
Mm-hmm.
like absolutely gut wrenching. And the Rita Moreno's character. So instead of Doc being Doc, they've got Rita Moreno playing Doc's Puerto Rican wife, and I think they've done that really, really cleverly. I thought it was a really clever switch around, and to give her somewhere as well instead of Tony singing it, I thought it was
Mm-hmm.
just beautiful, really beautiful. And when she breaks up that fight, and of course she played that character in the original, and now she comes out and breaks up the fight. She has this amazing moment where she says, I saw you all grow up, and you've all grown up into rapists," and just walks out. Like it's really heavy hitting,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was really successful, actually, and not over the top. Felt really targeted and
Mm-hmm.
well done
Yeah,
for me
I mean,
anyway.
even the opening of this one, I mentioned before that the opening of the 1961 version, these two gangs that are sort of hustling. It's a dance. It's a wordless
Mm-hmm.
dance where they're hustling for territory. The opening of the new one follows just mostly just the Jets as they sort of
Yeah.
assemble, and you don't really know where they're going, but they're assembling and they're grabbing different implements, and where they're going, they end up at a basketball court and they deface a Puerto Rican mural.
Mm-hmm.
Like that alone sets the tone for how things are going to be in the
Mm-hmm.
film, and I think it's far more successful as a result. I think it's a
Yeah.
very interesting and appropriate choice that it's also made clear that all of the Jets are just the wayward sons of drunken Irish laborers, whereas all of the Sharks have jobs and careers and other things going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like the implication being that they're more, despite being called lazy and freeloaders and all
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that they're called in the film, they're actually more hardworking and they're more community
Mm-hmm.
minded, and it's I think it feels very, especially after the last 5 years, it feels very targeted. And then
Mm-hmm.
just the choice that all of the Spanish in the new version is, first off, they're Spanish, and second off, none of it is subtitles. And I think that's also a pretty big flex. And I do remember that when someone questioned him about it, Spielberg literally just said, "Well, we're a bilingual country, so
Mm-hmm.
why would I subtitle it?" But I kind of respect that kind of flex.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah. It
Uh,
doesn't necessarily play as well outside of America, where we're a bilingual country, but one of them isn't Spanish.
yeah,
And I think having grown up with French and learned a bit of Italian, and I think that I have a bit of an advantage and that I don't necessarily need the subtitles, but I imagine it's hard for some. But I think an American production of an American story in America, I think it's a pretty pointed choice, and I kind of respect it a lot.
yeah. So I, out of everything that happened, every choice in that movie, that's the one I thought about the most. Um, so before I get into this, I think it's really important to remind everyone that Steven Spielberg is the greatest living filmmaker, and his decisions and opinions are correct. even when I even when I say I don't think this was the right thing to do, he is right because he's Steven Spielberg. So, but I'm in two minds about this. First of all, you're totally right. It's a massive flex. It says a lot about uh, integration and learning things outside of your box. And of course, in America, it's another social comment. Um, also think you don't need to, like, I've taught English for a long, long time. I've taught many, many different languages English, and I've heard many different languages. And what's really apparent is that you don't need to know a language to understand what people are talking about if you can see
Hmm.
them. Like, if you can see them and you understand the context, you can kind of get it. However, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, as a writer and a storyteller, I think it's equally important that your viewer gets what you're trying to say, what your characters are saying, because my Spanish is not great, but I actually understand Spanish more than like French because I've taught so many. I've taught like Spanish speakers for over 10 years, and they always want to speak Spanish. It is such a beautiful language. I love Spanish more than any other language. I just love listening to it. And for some reason, maybe it's just through immersion, I find it easier to understand than people speaking French or German or anything else. So I could kind of get what was going on, but I found frustrated. Like, I wanted to know, like, that moment when sorry, I've forgotten the character's name. Chino, when Chino walks in after Bernardo, Bernardo's dead, and he walks into the remains of the sharks, and they have this really impassioned conversation because Chino's got a gun, and he's calling them. He calls Bernardo an idiot for dying in this way. He calls him a fool. Like, that was, I would say, about 90% of that whole conversation is in Spanish, and I was really wanting to know everything they were saying because there was some great acting going on and it just sounded amazing. But I think there's a balance between making a point and telling your story, and I don't think the balance was correct in some of this movie. A reminder: Spielberg's right, but I I know why he did it. I get why he did it. I think it's a really important point to make about not assuming everything will default into English because there's more Spanish speakers now anyway. But I wanted to know every element of the story that I was really in love with, and I think that maybe subtitles or a more balance of English over the Spanish, just so I don't miss anything. That's
See,
my position on this.
I sort of disagree, if only because the tools are there for us to find out what they were saying in Spanish, and especially in a place like New York where Spanish is effectively the dominant language. And there's lots of people who speak Spanish who struggle with English who don't get the same considerations. I think that
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of fine with it. I'm fine with it.
The,
I think
I
it's
mean
an
that.
important way to do things because, like I say, like if you go to New York, like even just watch like New York baseball games, like everything is there in Spanish and English, and usually in that order as well. If you look
Mm-hmm.
closely, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
like URLs that are in the background or the advertising, there's Spanish first, and I think it's tougher being in Canada in a place where we're just not expected to know it.
Yeah,
But
and
at this
and
point, I think in America, I think it's sort of part of the point is that really, if you live in America in 2021, maybe you should know it. Like it's
yeah. No, these are all valid points. Absolutely, these are all valid points, and it's a valid way to make that point. I really totally get that. But I mean, it's hard as a Canadian, but it's harder as an English person because we do not value learning languages like you guys do. Like at least you have two official languages, so you understand the concept of changing one language to another. We grew up in England thinking English is the default. I remember asking my dad, I remember this really clearly, why are there other languages if they just get translated into English anyway? Why not just everyone speak English? Why bother having different languages? And that's our attitude. Like we go
So I'm
abroad
actually
and we
in
shout things.
so in this moment, I'm actually a lot more curious about what your father said to that rather than why you asked it as a kid. I think that's a pretty that's like as you having a child be like, why aren't there other languages? Is a perfectly reasonable thing. But then I'm really curious to find out what your father said to that because that says a lot more about British attitudes than the kid asking the question.
No, well, my
Not to put your
dad.
father on the spot.
No, absolutely. That to be fair, like my dad worked as an agricultural journalist for 30 odd years, and he spent most of that time traveling to different countries. He's been to every country in the world to look at pigs, basically. Um, and his I love listening to him. He speaks Spanish, he speaks French, he speaks German, but he speaks them all like 1940s Englishman, like Denham Elliott in Indiana Jones. Like, you know, when Denham Elliott gets lost in the third Indiana Jones movie?
Yep.
It's like, oh, does anyone speak ancient Arabic? Like, that's my dad completely. He's like, every language is in a British accent. And so I'm sure, I am positive he explained to me that English is not the default because I would have remembered that answer. But certainly when I'm at school, like there's just the general British attitude of like you have to learn French, you know, in case we fight them again or something. I don't know. And I learned a bit of German as well. But really, the 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 importance of different languages wasn't drummed in until I moved out of England, certainly, even some time in Wales. But so my point is I think that my point is I'm still sort of struggling with is I miss some of this movie because I didn't speak the language and a decision was made to not tell me some of this movie in the basis terms. Now I know why he did it. I agree why he did it. I think it's a fantastic way to make that point, but I still miss some of this movie, and that's really where I am right now. Like,
But and I'm just saying, I think that might actually be the point.
yeah, I
That's all I'm
and,
saying, right?
and I'm not sure. Yeah.
And I
I
get,
mean,
and I
everyone's
think
right, but I don't know how I feel about that. Do you know what I
I
mean?
think the point is that for people like you and I, and especially people like you and I in America, and for the record, I'm 6'5" and white and blonde, and
You're
and Simon
very,
and
very
Simon is
European.
what 6 foot tall and the most British you can imagine, except he has good teeth.
Dark
Um,
and handsome.
yeah, and we are, in filmmaking, we are the default, right? Like it's
Hmm.
the choice to exclude us is not a choice for everyone else, right? It's just
Yeah,
if you happen to be a Spanish language speaker and you go to a film in America, they're not generally going to speak Spanish, even though
yeah,
there's more of you than there are of them. So
yeah.
I think the point is that that we are made uncomfortable, and that discomfort hopefully sparks change.
Hey, do you know
So.
the really good thing about this actually is that my daughter's watched. She won't watch past the Rumble. She doesn't want nice people to die, and my wife's in the same position. But my daughter's now, after watching West Side Story, started asking me a lot about how does she learn Spanish. How
Mhm.
like she wants to learn Spanish. She wants to be able to communicate with people, and so hell, like that's the point well made, right? She I was really curious how she would get on with it. She didn't ask once, like, why do I not understand this? Her response was, how do I learn Spanish? And I think
Yeah,
that's really awesome. That's really cool.
yeah. Well, it's a good thing that Duolingo exists, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
But I mean, the film's a masterpiece from front to back. I loved it. It's one of the biggest surprises for me actually was Ansel Elgort.
Is that?
Which,
Sorry, is that Freud? Is that your dog? running
Oh.
around in the background.
So my dog has just come back, and my couch is maybe 1 inch higher than his little old legs can propel. So he's been trying to throw himself up onto the couch, but now he's succeeded and he's about to go to sleep. So
Okay, good.
yes, that was my dog. Um,
So the
Ansel
biggest surprise for you, Ansel Elgort?
Ansel Elgort, who I uh, for me, he's a bit of a personality vacuum, and he's in the same camp as Taylor Kirsch and Miles Teller for me. Like, I actively try to avoid movies. Like, I don't think he was great in Baby Driver. I think he's a bit of a blank slate. And what I was really surprised about in this movie is how much Marlon Brando swagger, like Guys and Dolls swagger, he has in this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he really impressed me in this. He was, maybe because I went in with very low opinions of him. I mean, he's problematic person. If certain things have come to light with how he deals with certain people that are not necessarily great,
And you can
but
just
say
say
that
that he's been accused of sexual misconduct. You can just say
I
that.
couldn't remember the details actually. I knew it was something horrible, but I didn't
Yeah,
research it again. Um,
yeah. He's been accused of
so
sexual misconduct and grooming younger women
oh,
of
that's
of
right.
doing
Yeah,
thing, and it's not good. It's not good. And
yeah,
from what I understand, the
it's
film was sort of too far along to and
yeah,
too involved to recast or redo anything by the time it came out. So.
yeah. It's a shame because a lot of people didn't go see it because of that, and it's I get it, but it's a shame that this kind of masterpiece is affected that way. But I thought he was good in this. There's some emotional reactions which are a bit off, but I thought he was good. He had good swagger. He had he can sing. He can dance. These are things that really surprised me. But the rest of the cast are beyond stellar. Like, of course, when you're Spielberg making West Side Story, you can pick whoever you want, and the people he picked for this.
Hmm.
Apparently, Rachel Zegler, who plays Maria, this is her first film role, so I'd love to
Hmm.
know her background. But he also went for Ariana. I don't know how to say her last name. Is it DeBose? DeBose? Do you
And
know how to say
DeBose,
her last name?
I think it's DeBose.
Ariana DeBose, who, if you've watched Hamilton on Disney Plus,
DeBose.
DeBose, she is the one of the ensemble, and she plays. She's really striking in that she's got this, first of all, amazing like look about her, but she plays the bullet as well, and she whispers. There's a wonderful scene where she whispers information into the king's ear, and she's great, stunning in that. She's also fantastic in Schmigadoon as the school mistress,
Hmm.
but she's Oscar nominated for this because and with very good reason, because she's just mind blowing. Like her focus, and not just the fact she can sing and dance and act, but her face is just, it's addictive. Whenever she's on screen, you just can't look away. And she goes from the high highs in the dance to the very low lows in when she's locked into docks with all the jets. She's just stellar. And I thought everyone else was fantastic, like without any exception. Corey Stoll was brilliant as Lieutenant Kropke as well. And uh, Rita Moreno, who I really haven't seen in anything, was amazing. And I believe she's been nominated for an Oscar too.
No, she won the Oscar in 1961 for the same role for as
She,
Anita.
she's not been nominated this year.
No.
Oh, my mistake. I must have misread that. But she's fantastic in this. And they, as I mentioned earlier, they've given her a part. They've rejigged the doc role to make it Valentina. She's amazing in it, and when she sings somewhere, it's just so moving. It really, really is.
Yeah.
But everyone was fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, there's no one who's I like my only disagreement with you is that I think that Ansel Elgort is fine,
Mm, yeah,
whereas everyone else is great.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, I,
and
I I don't really disagree with that. To be fair,
yeah. Um, I mean, I don't know what else is. I mean, it is a masterpiece. I think that all of the choices to rework where there's certain songs that are in different places. I think the best example of that is the place where the song "Cool" comes in this one
mm,
is a better choice than
mm,
where it comes in the 1961 version. In the 1961 version, it's after the Rumble, and it's about ICE taking over as leadership of the Jets, and it's about trying to get them to sort of like calm down and play it cool. Whereas in this version, it's Tony trying to convince Rip not to go to the Rumble at all, and I think it's a much
much
better
more
and more
sense.
impactful moment in the story.
Yeah.
And pretty much all the choices like that are the correct choices, I would say. Not that the original is bad in any way, but I think that it's better.
There's one. I would say I think I prefer the ending of the original better, just because it does that. It takes a bit more time with Natalie Wood's emotional reaction to Tony dying, and it does that theatrical thing where it's the emotional climax where the good person has died, so they just bring out everyone to stand on, like a Greek chorus, to stand around and then walk away one by one, leaving just the that's a very emotional ending. I get much more emotional at the ending of the original West Side Story than Spielberg's. It just seemed to go a lot faster, but I'm a sucker for that very theatrical ensemble grief moment. That it's a classic bit of theatre directing, and I think it works really, really well. And I think I prefer that. But that
I think,
really,
I mean, the other big choice in this film that we sort of danced around but haven't really talked about is the fact that all of the Puerto Rican people are played by people of color and not white people in brown face, and I think that's also worth mentioning. I mean, Maria Wood is not Puerto Rican. I can't remember his name, Natalie Wood, but also they're all they're all people of color, and there's also representation of multiple multiple different kinds of people of color. Like Ariana DeBose is Afro Latina, and they're not just all just the same color beige. You know what I mean? There's a spectrum. It's important. It's an important point that we sort of glanced over, and it plays into the whole Spanish thing. But
but Bernardo's very much made up when you rewatch the original at that beginning, and I do love the beginning with the ballet dance off between the Jets and the Sharks. But when Bernardo's there, he's very.
That dude is Greek in real life.
Oh no, is he really?
Yeah. Oh, no. He's Greek American. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So yeah, I mean, overall, I think that this, again, I think part of that's being a product of its time, but also I think this film does a lot better job of being like, some of this shit was wrong. Like, let's correct some of the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's a shame that ultimately, I think it's considered a box office flop, right? Like, it's $100 million budget and only $75 or so million at the box office, and you can write off some of that to it being released at the head of the Omicron wave, right? Like, just as that wave was cresting, but also it's funny actually, because the prevailing attitude, at least on social media at the time, was, why would I see this? Why would they remake it? Why will we do this? And now that it's on Disney Plus, the prevailing social media is, look at this amazing camera work. Look at these dance numbers. Look how colorful it is. And it's like, you idiots. Like, just go see the goddamn movie. You know what I mean?
I think musicals are a harder sell for theatrical, anyway. I don't think there's a big contingent of people who just won't see musicals. We know a couple. And I think, going back to Schmigadoon, I think that's what it did really, really well, was that it was a series about musicals made by people who love musicals, made for people who hate them. And I think there's just people who are like, oh, it's musical. No, I'm not going to watch people sing their feelings. And that's fair. That's completely fair, because I had a good friend at university who just would never ever go and see musical. He was just so bored by them, and I think you've got to buy into that as a stylistic choice, and it's fine if you don't. But I think it was a combination of bad luck, really. But I'm glad people are getting to see it now. I mean, that's one of the benefits of being a bit of a box office dud, is that it went straight to streaming. Like, no one's had to really pay anything extra to watch this thing, and it's
but also that just happens now too, right? Like, it's just it's a longer conversation, but
that certainly is. But it is fantastic. It's a masterpiece. It is really nice, actually, how for all the crowd, like, why bother remaking a classic? And like, this is how you remake a classic. Spielberg very much could have just done almost a shot for shot for this and just made it another West Side Story.
Mm-hmm.
He should have called it another West Side Story, another West Side Story. But it is every ounce, every second of this has been reconceived to bring out the story on a different level, and it really shows.
Yeah. And, as of today, we are now 2 weeks away from this year's Oscars, where this movie is up for Best Picture, Director, Supporting Actress, Cinematography, Costume Design, Production Design, and Sound. Some of which you'll be able to see live in the broadcast.
Oh, don't even get me.
Which is just, let's not get into it. But and I think it's it's a deserving nominee in every category that it's nominated in. So,
I'm
which is
gonna be
nice.
I'm gonna be furious if it doesn't win all of them. Just a heads up for you now. Like,
Yeah,
absolutely
I
furious.
don't. Having seen most of the films, I honestly don't expect it to win most of them. However, I think it's a
Mm-hmm,
deserving nominee in every category it's nominated in.
mm-hmm,
I have
mm-hmm.
thoughts as to what's probably going to win, what's not. I think the only one that it might be a lock for is I think that Ariana DeBose is probably a lock for Best Supporting Actress.
Oh,
Probably.
I really hope so. Yeah,
Probably. Um, but I
it's a
think it.
shame. It's a shame Rachel Zegler didn't get a nomination. I think
She won a Golden
because
Globe, which is something.
yeah,
But and Mike Fast, whatever his name is, the guy who plays Riff.
I
Feist, I believe his name is Mike Feist. He won a
mhm,
BAFTA for Best Supporting Actor as well.
yeah. Oh, he's
I think
fantastic in that
he's
too.
fantastic and probably should have had more award representation as well.
Mm-hmm. I just love
So
the oh God, what's the name of the song that Anita sings to Maria um in the
you'll have
bedroom
to be,
after she spots Tony leaving out the window and she's like, she's one of your own. I can't remember what that song's called. And in the
yeah.
original, they're kind of smiling at each other. It's a lot less emotive in the original, and in this one, there is so much fury between them. And Rachel Zegler has a wonderful moment where she says, like in song, I'm not going to sing, but Anita, you should know better. You've loved too, and just the fury that comes out of this girl, and she's so young. I just brilliantly reconceived. I thought it was much better actually in Spielberg's
I
version.
think that's called a boy like that.
A boy
I don't know
like
if that's
that,
what
sure.
a boy like
Yeah,
that, or I have a. Hang on, I'm googling. Yeah, it's
yeah,
called a boy like that. I have a love.
yeah. Just,
Um,
just fantastic. And when they're doing the split harmony over each other, it's just the emotion between those two actresses was incredible. Really great.
yeah, that's. I mean, we go back to talking about sort of stagey versus cinematic. One of the ways the
Mhm.
film is more cinematic is that it's far more believably emotive.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
like, not to say that stage acting is not believable, but it's just more stagey. It's bigger. Bigger is the way to describe it, right?
Absolutely.
It's
It's a different style of acting, absolutely. And I've taught both, and I've done both, and I appreciate both. And it gives a very different feel to something. To have it's really interesting actually having a theatrical acting style version versus Spielberg's very cinematic style, and you can really see the differences between them. And they're
mhm.
both brilliant in their own way.
Yeah, true. So,
So I quite
uh,
liked it.
I'm guessing what 5 out of 5 for you?
Yeah, I mean, that there's not a universe where this is not a 5 out of 5 movie. You're going to give it 4 now, aren't you?
I can't remember what I gave it before, but I think I gave it a 4.
Yeah, you did.
Probably gave it a 4. Um, and I think that holds. I think as much as I love this movie a lot, yeah, I gave it a 4. Um, I think there's other films I would say are the best picture of the year over it.
What would you say
But
is better
it's
than this? Are you going to say Power of the Dog?
yeah, yeah, I am actually.
That's a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think either way, I think the award is the Power of the Dogs to lose at this point.
Yeah, yeah, no. I think that's becoming
Um,
quite clear, isn't it?
but honestly, I've seen most of the Best Picture nominees at this point. There's only one 3 I think I haven't seen, and only one that's still not available to me. And of the 7 that I've seen, like there's only one that I would say doesn't even is bad. There's only one that I would be like, why is this in the best picture category?
Is Drive My Car in Best Picture?
It is, yes.
Have you seen that yet?
No, we
Okay.
are hopefully going to watch it soon, but it's
Mm.
we we've been busy around the Simpson household, and it's a 3 hour commitment. So
Yeah, it's a long time.
yeah, and it's just I'm gonna the awards are in 2 weeks, so we're definitely gonna make an effort to.
Mm.
I want to have seen them all, but Nightmare Alley still I don't think is available, or if it is, it's only available on a platform we don't have.
Talking of
So
awards, the BAFTAs are on right now. Were you aware of that? The British Academy Film and Television Awards. And
the
Canto's
BAFTAs
just
are
put
on
this
right
second,
now.
right now. I've just put BBC on via my VPN, and
Oh,
things are winning things.
oh. Well, isn't that
Um,
lovely?
yes, I'm sure we'll talk about that maybe next week.
Yeah,
So, shall we go on
probably.
to our next movie?
Yes, that's an awkward segue, so let's take it.
That's the best I got. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we're gonna move on to the latest Netflix blockbuster, which is the Sean Levy directed, Ryan Reynolds starring The Adam Project. And this is gonna be an entertaining conversation, folks, because I think one of us loved this movie and the other one thought it was almost fine.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't talked about it ahead of time like we usually do.
No.
So here we go with the Adam Project. So Simon, of the one of us who loved this film, why don't you give us a crack at giving us a quick rundown on the Adam Project?
So, The Adam Project is a family time traveling adventure movie, and I think Sean Levy is one of the best directors for that particular genre, that kind of early teen fantastical, like Night at the Museum 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, I haven't seen Real Still. He's done other stuff, but this is another great family adventure from him. And basically, it's Ryan Reynolds going back in time to try and stop something from happening because it makes things bad. And he accidentally, instead of going to the time he needs to go to, he goes through a series of hilarious events. He goes to a time where he goes to 2020 instead of 2018, and he meets his eight, right? 8 year old,
So
eight,
he's
8 year
shooting
old
to
self.
fly. He's from 2050. He's shooting to go back to 2018 to speak to his father, and he ends up in 2022 speaking to his 12-year-old self.
And unfortunately, this is not a spoiler, but his father's dead at that
Yeah,
point.
and in
So,
2022 his father's passed on.
right. So, he needs to fix his ship, and he needs to get back to 2018 and try and stop this horrific thing from happening. And I your love of this movie is going to completely depend on how you feel about Ryan Reynolds' shtick in full
Yeah,
flow,
to say the
how
least.
you feel about an 8 year old boy mirroring and parroting Ryan Reynolds' 8 year old shtick,
12
and
year old,
if
but yes,
is he 12? Sorry, 12.
he's 12. Yeah.
Um, he's 12. If you are okay with that, then you're going to be fine. If for any reason you're kind of a bit tired of that, this movie is going to rub you up the wrong way because it has two versions of Ryan Reynolds and they both try and do the shtick. In fact, for the kid, it's a defining factor that he can't shut up and he's really mouthy. And sometimes it works. And I would guess that your reaction to this film is that it the shtick didn't work for you. That would be my guess.
Actually, that's not it at all.
Oh, okay,
Um,
fantastic. Tell me about it.
so for me, my issues are I actually think that the kid, whose name is Walker Scobell, he's actually really, really good. And it's his first acting, not just his first film role, it's his first time acting ever. He sent
Really?
in an audition tape and got the part, which is incredible. And
Wow.
apparently, and he's so good at being young Ryan Reynolds. And apparently,
Mm.
the thing that clinched the role for him is that at the age of 11, he has memorized the Deadpool movies. He can literally recite them verbatim, And there's been some social media clips of Ryan Reynolds just videoing this kid doing the movie, and it's pretty amazing.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Cool.
I think that him and Ryan Reynolds have a very good and interesting chemistry. As they're the same character, but they're basically little brother, big brother type dynamic, and it works really well. I think that Mark Ruffalo, who plays their father in 2018, brings a certain emotionality to the proceedings that is welcome, given that Ryan Reynolds' whole shtick is that he doesn't really give a shit about anything. He's always sarcastic. He's always aloof, right? That's his whole thing. So having another character there to be the one who cares about shit is good. And I think Mark Ruffalo is really good at that. I think that this movie, at 97 minutes long, lacks a lot of the connective tissue that would make parts of it make sense and would make the parts that are still mostly resonant more resonant, personally. Also, there's some really dodgy effects towards the end, but that's very nitpicky. But
it would be fine if the effects weren't absolutely central to one of the characters.
Yeah.
if it was just a bit of dodgy compositing, then as there is, then it's fine. But there is a decision made, and the tech that they used was not up to that decision at
Which is
all.
funny, because I was just reading the production notes, and apparently they brought in the same company that did it for Marvel and that did the digital body doubling for The Social Network. So the pedigree's there.
What?
But it just
really?
didn't work out. So because it's not good.
It's horrific.
But that's a pretty minor, for me, honestly, that's a pretty minor point when you consider that the back half of the movie, basically, even though it's the part where Mark Ruffalo shows up to bring emotional stakes, it stops trying to pay off any of the emotional stakes it's set up in the first half. And Jennifer Gardner, who plays the character's mother, has some really important scenes at the beginning of setup with the kid, and then there's a really great scene, I thought, at the Blarney Stone, which is a Vancouver local haunt, where she goes for a drink, and Ryan Reynolds is there to be like, your kid doesn't hate you. And it's a really emotional and well done scene, I thought. But then she just disappears from the movie from that point on, right? She's not there until the end, even though they're still in the present for a good long time. And it's also just Ryan Reynolds and Sean Levy got together and said, what's your favorite 80s movie stuff? And they just brainstormed, and it went lightsabers and hoverboards and time travel, and they just made a movie that's all of those things. And I don't know, I found it to be kind of hollow, especially towards the end. I just didn't. It's frustrating because there's parts of it that I really liked and I really wanted to love it, and I just don't.
Interesting, man. I have a completely different reaction to it.
Well, here's a good point. The movie is littered with late 70s and early 80s needle drops, which is obviously they were like, yeah, we should do that Guardians of the Galaxy thing, which isn't a bad thing, but and if you're paying attention, I suppose you can pick up that the reason there's all these needle drops is because Mark Ruffalo's character is a big fan of that music, and the main character has these daddy issues. But there's no scene that makes that clear at any point. There's no scene of Mark Ruffalo listening to music at any point. We're told that the reason that he's coming back in time, that Ryan Reynolds is coming back in time, is that the future is a dystopia. It's Terminator 2 on a good day. But we never see that future. We're never given any reason to really give a shit about it. And there's a scene towards the end where that is, I don't want to spoil it too badly, but there's a scene towards the end, which is the big climactic scene where one character says, you didn't understand this, and the other person says, you didn't understand that. And I'm deliberately trying to be vague, so it's not going to be a well-made point. But there's no reason for us to understand or care why character B, quote, doesn't understand that. A lot of the really small moments that would have made this movie great are missing. a lot of the moments that would give the story the context it needs to be great are missing. And because they're missing, the story lacks something and it ends up feeling hollow. And that's my problem with the film.
Interesting. So I was a lot more comfortable with a lot of that. Yeah, you're totally right. They don't show the future, but I was in a position just to accept like it's really bad and just being told it's really bad. I didn't necessarily need to see it. And the for me the emotional payoff at the end was actually quite strong in terms of the father working out, like Ruffalo's character working out what he meant to his kids, and the kids working out what the father meant, um, even though their opinion of him was that he was off working all the time, or how much he cared for them and how much he loved them. And I thought it said a lot about memory and how we remember things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And all the it's interesting how all these story elements like lightsabers and hoverboards and all the sci-fi stuff. Like I just really enjoyed all of those elements for what they were. I don't think I was quite as cynical about their additions in that I think they all worked really, really well because like the lightsaber thing was interesting because it was very much a lightsaber, but they used it as a joke for the kid to kind of when he first picks up the stick, it's like, is this a lightsaber? And older Ryan Reynolds was like, no, it's not a lightsaber. And then that pays off later when it's clearly some kind of electro tool lightsaber.
Yeah.
So little things like that worked for me. I loved the comment on people being fated to meet each other as well because his Zoe Saldana, who's not in it very much, but she's his wife that he's come back to find in 2018, who was uh, disappeared apparently in an explosion, but he works out that there's a conspiracy against her, and that's never really explained too much why Catherine Keener is so evil with a capital E. But I found that really quite emotional actually when they met up again and he realized that he had to go back and stop things, which means they would never meet. But the this idea that they'll find each other eventually, I thought was really really sweet. And I found the moment at the end, and yeah, you've seen the giant thing exploding at the end where everyone just about saves the day a million times before, but I thought it was done really really well, choreographed well. And that moment at the end where they say goodbye and they've been trying to kind of not break the future by telling their dad that he's about to die in an accident, and it turns out he worked it out anyway, and he has this wonderful moment at the end about what what uh, what memory is and what like seeing your kids grow up is good enough for him to see what happens now. And I thought that was just really really sweet. I really liked it. And the only thing I didn't like actually was really really early on to establish that the Jennifer Gardner and the son don't have a good relationship. There's a breakfast scene where she's trying to pay some bills, and I think it's later established that he's just really grumpy, just really sad and grumpy. But his line read is like super sarcastic. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between sarcastic and distant. And
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the line reads were actually wrong. I think some of the direction of the line reads was wrong because he came across as there was no difference in that scene to any of his other sarcastic scenes that he'd had up to that point. There was no extra element of distance or sadness or grief or like mourning. He was just being an absolute dick, and I almost texted you. So, do we have to put up with this precocious prick for the whole movie? Because it, it if he'd shown, if that kid had shown grief at that moment, then you could have understood where that distance was coming from. But he just came across as a really arrogant prick, and I think that was actually a wrong decision for a line read. But
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of fixed later. So that was my biggest problem with the movie is that there's a big blip there. But I just really like how the kid didn't annoy me towards the end. I think I was quite surprised how that Ryan Reynolds shtick and at some point it's gonna stop being okay. And I really hope it's beyond the next Deadpool, because Sean Levy's also just been locked down to direct Deadpool 3, and I think it's a great choice. But if you watch something like Red Notice, which absolutely puts all of its money into the 3 stars doing the thing that people know them for. So The Rock being The Rock and Gal Gadot being mysterious and beautiful, and Ryan Reynolds just on 110% sarcastic asshole. Red Notice is a difficult film to watch because it is just awful, awful, awful film. Whereas in this, I just think it worked, and I think sometimes it's just going to work. And so I was quite happy how the relationship with the kid worked out as well. I enjoyed the chase scenes. The CG is really shoddy throughout, but I really liked the standoff on the beach, and I really liked the emotional and action based climax. Apart from the one CG choice for a digital actor that is truly tremendously awful and kind of breaks immersion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like these people didn't have references of how this person acted and moved at that age, because they have many, and so it's a bit of a mystery to me. But maybe they just ran out of money. This shit can't be cheap, so they just probably didn't
Yeah,
have the budget for it.
I have nothing on which to base this, but I do know that they used like a second actor, and then they composited, and then they reshot the main like they. So it's Catherine Keener we're talking about. So they had a younger actress there with her doing the scenes, and then they had a rig set up where they basically shot Catherine Keener's face with the same lighting, and she just recreated the performance of her younger self, and then they composited that face onto the younger actress, and for whatever reason, it does not work. Um,
No.
it it I can't put my finger on exactly why, and it's not an uncanny valley thing where it looks too good to be true. It just
No,
doesn't look
it
good.
doesn't.
It's not good.
Like, well, first of all, it doesn't look like Catherine Keener when she was that age. She's meant to be 30. Like, you can Google Catherine Keener at 30 and find what she actually looked like. But
Yeah,
also, when you watch it, if you watch it again, the thing that really stuck out for me was her neck. Her neck was
yeah.
about a third longer than it should have been, and it just looked really weird,
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
super weird.
the choice to cast a second actor and just sort of digitally graft the face on might have just been it, in that I think they were trying to make Catherine Keener's face conform to that actor's face shape and
Yeah,
body, and then they just don't move the same. Like they didn't have the same.
yeah,
Like one of the big things that really does work in this film is that Walker Scobell and Ryan Reynolds clearly spent enough time together that they not only sound alike,
mm,
but they move alike. And
yeah,
Catherine Keener and her younger self just don't. And that's
yeah.
again another sort of frustration for me, is that all the pieces are there, like all the nostalgia references that I mentioned as sort of being a problem. Like to me, maybe wouldn't necessarily have been a problem if there had been, I don't know, one new thing, like
Mhm.
um, and all the stuff you're talking about, all the emotional moments. Yeah, there's a moment at the end where the father reconciles with the two versions of his son, and they sort of all have a nice little emotional catharsis about how they perceive each other, and that works like everything like that works like gangbusters. It's just that everything that
Mhm.
you have to go through to get to those bits does not really work out. As soon as you get out of the first half of the movie, at least, maybe even just the whole first after the whole first act, none of it ties together correctly. None of the stuff that needed to pay off paid off. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Well, no, because
Um,
I don't agree at all. But it's really
yeah,
interesting to hear like a mirror version of the same thing.
yeah, and it's again like I've been sort of struggling with what rating I would give this movie out of five, because I honestly, there's parts of it that I liked and there's parts of it that I don't. But the problem is that I can't get the parts that I didn't like out of my head.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, 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 totally.
so it's it's either a fun-filled family adventure, nostalgia throwback to the 80s, or it's a film cobbled together from references to better films without the connective tissue to make it a good film.
So you
It's
should,
it's
listeners, you should watch this and decide which camp you're in here.
yeah, it's definitely one of the two of those things. I honestly am having trouble telling you which one it is at the moment. In some ways it's both. And honestly, I'm tempted to say that it's a 3 out of 5 because ultimately it's mostly fine. It's mostly fine. And I may be being hypercritical, but ultimately, like, and then there's another thing that really bothers me about it that I won't say because it's a spoiler, but like, I just wanted it to be better. I don't know, that's not really necessarily a fair way to judge a film, but I wanted it to be better. And it's just not. Although, I will say, it was fun playing Spot the Vancouver location because it was very, very much so shot in Vancouver.
But the street outside the Blarney Stone has never looked that clean and
yeah.
Swept.
Yeah.
That's Europe.
Although the Vancouver Convention Center just does always look that futuristic, so that's nice.
Yeah, it does. It really does. They didn't have to do much there at all, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So, you know what? It's probably a 3 out of 5 for me as well, which is weird. But for entirely positive reasons, it would be a 4 if it weren't for horrific non-Catherine Keener at the end. And I just love. I mean, Zoe Saldana's barely in this movie, and honestly, there's not a massive connection between her and Ryan Reynolds. The chemistry is fine. It's not like you don't feel it burning off the page. But she does this thing where she is so authentic, and when she smiles at him, she crinkles her nose, and god damn it, I'm a simple creature. And then she kicks some serious ass. I mean, she's a wonderful actress anyway. It made me even want to try and rewatch Colombiana, which is not a good movie, but she is really she's really in that too. she's just really watchable.
I mean, Colombiana does have one great scene, but it's not an overall great film.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so
good.
what are we watching next week?
You know, honestly, I don't at this point know. So let's just say it's going to be a surprise
to us as well.
Yeah. One thing that I would like to try and watch is that in addition to the Academy Awards coming up on the 27th of March, the Canadian Screen Awards are happening in the early part of April. So I would like to maybe try and get us to watch a couple of the Canadian Screen Award Best Picture nominees. I've already seen a couple of them, but
what are you saying? Canadian what?
The Canadian Screen Awards. They're the Canadian Academy. Yeah.
Right.
They,
I thought you said Canadian Queen Award.
That's a different competition, sir. No, the Canadian Screen Awards they're happening in early April. There's 5 films nominated for Best Picture. I've seen, I think, 3 of them already. We actually do have a screener for one of them, so we could talk about that one. And I think it's important that we talk about some media from our home nation, or my home nation anyway. You're a citizen though, so it's yours too.
I have a passport and everything now, so yes, I should look at that.
Good.
Yes, I have heard of that. But yes,
we also technically have the Canadian Film Festival coming up, to which we've been invited to cover this year, which is exciting.
Ooh, fancy!
So I will. I believe we have some screeners to talk about there too.
Yes, good. That'll give us enough to carry on with, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you can also find. I just recorded. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to drop, but I just recorded a guest appearance on a podcast called Classic Movies Live, and we're talking about a really terrible Anna Kendrick movie called Rapture Palooza for their series about Anna Kendrick movies. And I think if all goes to plan, I'll be guesting on the Lambcast as well for their Oscar preview show, which I'm pretty excited about. So yeah, cool. Stuff's happening, man. Stuff's happening.
Excellent. Well, be sure to check all that out. If only there was some way to support you doing all this premium film review content.
I know, right? That reminds me. There should be this week. There'll be a special episode of the podcast being published where I will be speaking with Canadian film director Seth A. Smith, who directed a not fun, but a little indie dystopian Canadian sci-fi film called Tin Can last year, which I got to see at VIFF. I got to speak to him this week, so there'll be a special episode of the podcast up this week for that.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. But if you do want to support us, the best thing you can do is listen to us. So thank you for doing that. And if you would like to give us a 5-star review on whatever podcasting platform you are listening to us on, that would be amazingly appreciated. If you'd like to support us in a more direct fashion, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, and you can find links to both of those at the website, which is awesomefriday.ca. As always, we record and produce this on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations, and we are eternally grateful for your listenership. Yeah. What do you got coming up, Simon? Anything you want to add to that? I think that's everything.
No, I mean, I'm just grateful to have time to watch anything these days. So, no, I am enjoying our little Star Trek project. We're currently in the middle of recording some interesting Star Trek stuff for you, and because of that, I'm rewatching Star Trek with my family. And it turns out my wife is really knowledgeable about Star Trek, and I had no idea. So that's fun. But honestly, the time I have to watch stuff is so limited. It's nice to be able to squeeze stuff in. Nice. So my kids only watched Turning Red twice since it came out on Friday, and today's Sunday morning. So I anticipate we'll be watching Turning Red for another 5 or 6 times before next weekend. At least.
Fun.
Because they really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Because it's great.
Excellent.
But yes. Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We're going to sign off. Everyone have a lovely week, and we will see you next week with another Awesome Friday. Bye.
Bye-bye.